Hello everyone, welcome back to Weaponized CAD. This is Danny. Today we are talking about AutoCAD modifiers. In the last episode I said that we were going to move from the line command to the polyline command, but it actually makes more sense now that we have some lines drawn to move into the modifiers and then bounce back to the polylines, because we have objects we can manipulate now with these lines, and we're going to start running through some of the modify commands. So your modify commands are up here in your ribbon in your home tab in the modify panel. First modifier is move, and move works similar to grabbing the middle grip of an object. This is technically moving this line, even though down in the command line it's telling us that it's stretching it. Essentially it's stretching the entire object, which is a pseudo move command of sorts. So let's click the move command. Down in the command line, it's going to say move, select object. You can window select using the crossing window, or like I was telling you in the first episode, if you cross from left to right, everything that falls within this box will be selected. So if you notice, as I move up and these lines in the center of the drawing are not fully encompassed in the box, they're actually not selected. So that's how that works. I know I showed you guys quickly how that works. This is a better example of it because we actually have objects. So the move command, you can select one object, you can select all the objects. After you have them selected down in the command line, it's going to tell you that you have, or we have, 7 found objects and 1 duplicate, which means that I selected this object but then windowed all of the objects. So this one is the duplicate. It's still included in the selection set, but it's letting me know that we had previously selected that line, and it's trying to select it again, but it doesn't need to because it's already selected. After we have our object selected, we can either hit enter, or we can right click quickly using that delayed right click. I'm going to right click, and now it's asking us to specify a base point or displacement. For this example, we're only going to use the base point. So let's say we needed to move all of these lines from one point. Let's say we needed to move them 10 feet to the right, or 10 units to the right. In this case, it doesn't matter where your base point is. That's just your starting point of the measurement to move. So let's just click out here in space. I'm going to left click. And now this is where the F8 command comes in. F8 turns on our ortho. Ortho locks the cursor to 90-degree angles. So because we want to move 10 units to the right, we want F8 on. Otherwise, it's going to move it in whatever direction the cursor is pointing. And it gives you that dashed orange line. And that's telling you the direction that it's going, but it's not giving you the angle in an obvious place. It's off the side of the cursor, and unfortunately I can't move my cursor over to show you, but if you actually hit the tab button, you notice that where it says specify second point or use first point as displacement, it says 3.1629, and then next to it is less than 23 degrees. If you hit the tab button, you can actually type a degree in there, the actual angle that you want to move it. So let's move it 45, and then let's hit tab again, and now you'll notice that my cursor, the orange hidden or dashed line, is locked at 45 degrees, and there's actually a little lock symbol on the 45 degrees that we just keyed in. So let's just move it 1, because otherwise it's going to go into my lines up there. So we locked the 45 degrees, and this isn't locked in a sense that you can't change it if you decide, I don't really need 45 degrees. Let's say I wanted 25 degrees. Or let's say I wanted negative 25 degrees. And then we move it 1, and we hit enter. And what it did was it moved these lines 25 degrees southeast 1 unit. So that's pretty much the move command. Now the move command is also M on the keyboard, brings up our dynamic input. Move is the first command that pops up because it's a single character. click move. I'm going to window everything. If I just needed to move this stuff out of the way, you don't have to be technical about it. You can say, all this stuff is in the way. I'm going to mouse wheel back, zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to pick out here in space, and I'm just going to move this junk over here. And then I'm going to pan over, and I'm going to zoom in so I can see it. So I'm going to undo, U, enter. And now because undo was the previous command, if I hit enter again, and enter again, and enter again, it's actually going to undo back as far as you want, just hitting the enter button. And the enter button is the same thing as the quick right click. So if I wanted to undo all the way back to before I moved these lines, I can just right click, and now they're moved back. Now you have to be very careful with that, because if your previous command was undo, you can accidentally undo way further back than you intended on if you right click like a maniac. Okay, so that's the move command. Next one we're going to do is rotate. Rotate command is pretty simple, just asks you down in the command line to select objects. So let's select this object here. And after we select it, we right click or we hit enter. Either one, it's the same thing. And it's going to ask us to specify the base point. Now, the base point is just like the move command, where it's asking you for the base point that you want to move from and to. But with rotate, it's a little bit different. Rotating, it's going to rotate the object about that base point. So if we were to pick the midpoint using the midpoint O snap, it's going to rotate the object about that midpoint. If we were to rotate again, which is RO on the keyboard, select that object again, and we were to pick down below it, it's now rotating the object about that point. And you can actually rotate it and key in degrees. So it asks you for this to specify the rotation angle, and there's actually a down arrow telling us that there's another command down here. So you remember what I was saying about how certain commands have subcommands? You can rotate, specify rotation angle, or copy, or reference. Reference we're not going to get into right now. It's a little bit more technical. But this 0 right here is the angle of rotation of the original object. So let's say we type 25 as our rotation angle. Now you're going to notice that it rotated counterclockwise. AutoCAD, 0 is east. So here, I'm gonna draw a little compass here. I'm gonna turn on that. I'm gonna say midpoint of this. And I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna stretch it down. This is 0. This is 90. This is 180. This is 270. So a compass north is typically 0, you would assume. North is how a compass works because it's pointing at the North Pole, but not in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, the 0 degree is at the east point of the compass. So when we rotated that 25 degrees, it actually rotated it up this way 25 degrees, counterclockwise 25 degrees. If I do RO and I select this and I pick that midpoint and I type 25, that's exactly what happened. Now it rotates 25 degrees with no regard to where the rotation is of the actual object. It's an absolute rotation. It's just like picking up a pencil on your desk and rotating it 25 degrees. That pencil doesn't care what angle it's pointing at in relation to the North Pole. You're only picking it up and rotating it 25 degrees from its previous position. So that's the rotate command in a nutshell. I'm not going to get into the rotate reference. I'm not going to get into rotate copy. That's going to be much further down the road when we're doing some more technical stuff. Next one is copy. Up here in the modify panel of the home tab, we're going to click copy. Copy is also very simple. Copy, select objects. You can single click using the pick box. You can window. After you're done selecting your objects, you can quickly right click and it's going to ask you for a base point or displacement or mode. Now mode is not really something I bother with. It's set to multiple. We're going to pick our base point, which is here. If I want to copy this thing, all I'm doing is left clicking after I pick that base point, and it's just copying that object as many times as I click. I'm going to go back to the copy command. Just like the move command, copy works the same way in a sense that if you need to move something a specific distance, if I copy this object and I pull the cursor away, I have my F8 ortho on, so it's following the 0 degree on the compass, on the AutoCAD compass. So I've got it dragged away at 10.6882. Let's say I just want it at 10. You can just key in 10 and hit enter. Now these two lines are parallel to each other at 10 units apart. The next thing that we will look at is the mirror command. And like I was telling you in the first episode, if you hold the mouse over a command in the panel long enough, it actually displays how to use the command. Gives you a little bit of information and shows you a nice graphic. So if we click the mirror command, it's going to, once again, down in the command line, ask us to select objects. We're going to select this object again because we like that one. We're going to right click, and it's asking us to specify the first point of the mirror line. So a mirror is showing you a reflection of an object. You can mirror as though the object is directly in front of the mirror. So let's say we wanted to mirror this line and flip it so it's on this side. We just pick 2 points. You only have to pick 1 point, and it gives you a preview of what it's doing. So I'm mirroring over the y-axis right now, and it's mirroring it perfectly. If I were to move the cursor to the x-axis, you'll notice that it flips it over the x-axis. So this dashed orange line is essentially taking that object and flipping it over that line. If I were to turn ortho off using F8, it's like mirroring and rotating in the same move. So it's mirroring it over that orange line, but as I move the orange line, it's rotating the object around. And then to complete the command, you just left click. It's going to ask you if you want to erase the source objects. If you, for whatever reason, didn't need the line that you started the mirror command with, you can say yes. So what it would do is it would mirror the line over, you would have your new line here, and it would erase this line at the end of the command. In my case, I'm going to say no, and you're out of the command. It's that simple. You can mirror single objects, you can mirror multiple objects if we wanted to go crazy. I'm going to type MI because that's the keyboard command for mirror. MI, mirror. And I'm going to window all of these, and I'm going to mirror them across that. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to erase the source objects. And one of the things that I didn't mention is that when you are inside of a command, when you're running the mirror command, the move command, the rotate command, when you're in the polyline command, when you are drawing leaders and adding text, you can pan using the middle mouse button, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can even double click the mouse button, the mouse wheel, and zoom extents inside the command. So don't feel like you can't pan around, zoom in, zoom out while you're in the middle of a command. And a lot of people get hung up on that because they'll be drawing something and realize, hey, I needed a line that's 10,000 units long. Well, the end of the line on this side is going to be way past what we're looking at. You can just zoom out and pan over and look at wherever that line is. Okay, let's see, what else have we got up here? What other kind of goodies do we have? The stretch command is the one that I was telling you in the last episode that is kind of a pain to use. I think we're going to ignore the stretch command for now. If you need to stretch something, remember that you have grips. We have no command active, nothing down here. I'm going to crossing select both of those lines. This is the stretch command in its in its easiest form. Otherwise, when you're using the stretch command, it's very particular about where you create your stretch window, and we're not going to go any further into that right now. Next command we're going to talk about is the scale command. Click the scale command up here. I'm going to select this line. Now, because a line does not have a thickness, the scale command is only going to increase the length of the line. So I selected this object. I'm going to right click. It's going to ask me for a base point. At this point, you're now familiar with the base point. Let's pick the midpoint of the line here. And as I pull the cursor away from the object is growing. And I'm zooming out and I'm panning and I'm still pulling. It's showing you how big or how small the object is going to be. If you needed to scale it by a certain factor, you can say, okay, listen, I have, say it's a 10-foot line. I need that line to be 20 feet. Specify scale factor, 2, enter. It's now double the length. So the scale factor is how much you want to increase it by. 2 being 200%. So the line starts at 100% because the line is itself. By scaling it by 2, you're scaling that 100% twice to 200%. You don't have to type 200%, you just have to type 2. Or 1.1 to get 110%. Or 0.9 to get 90%. Next command up here, now we're going to start getting into some more technical stuff. Oh, well, the erase command. I haven't even covered that one yet. The erase command is literally exactly what it sounds like. You click the erase command. You can window select everything. Erase command. You can single click. And you're simply telling AutoCAD, all of these objects that I've selected, all I want to do is erase them. So it's a super simple command. Erase. Select objects. We've selected these objects. I'm going to right click. It just erases those 6 objects. If you accidentally erase something, remember you can use the undo command with U enter or the undo button up here at the top. I'm going to undo that. Trim is exactly what it sounds like. If you click the trim, it's going to ask you select object to trim or shift select to extend or cutting edges, crossing, mode, project, erase. So for the trim command, we're going to click trim. It's going to ask us to select object to trim. Now, you'll notice I'm not clicking anything. I'm simply mousing over the object. AutoCAD has advanced incredibly well in this command and the extend command. It used to be that you would have to pick a cutting object, say, I want to cut this line off at this line. Instead, they combined it to where it already assumes that any line it's crossing you want to trim at. So it's going to tell you, as you mouse over, I can just chop this off and stop it right here if you want. And it's as simple as left clicking. If we wanted to cut this middle piece out, we can do that too. It's going to use this as a cutting edge, and it's going to chop that starting point here all the way to here. Trim that guy out. We're going to go up to the top into the modify panel. We're going to click the down arrow next to trim, and we're going to go to extend. Now the extend command works in the opposite way that the trim command works. So trimming, you're cutting back to a line. Extending, you're shooting a line out to another object. So if we go like this and just simply mouse over this line, it's going to give you essentially a highlighted blue line of where it thinks it can go. Because this vertex here would intersect this line perfectly, it's going to shoot that out to us. Same thing if we go over here. So it's very important to understand that a line segment has 2 sides. You have the left side and the right side, and it's divided down the middle by the midpoint of the segment. you'll notice when I'm on the left side of this line segment, it's going to extend it to the left. If I'm on the right side of the line segment, it's going to extend it to the right. So the extend command, you can just start clicking like crazy. And if you have lines out in space, it's going to just shoot everything. You can extend through objects, and all I'm doing is left clicking. So when I was explaining the mode selection in the trim command and the extend command, it gave us two options. It gave us quick extend and quick trim, and it gave us standard extend and standard trim. Now, the way that I work, let's go back to the trim command. Click that drop down arrow up in the panel. We're going to go to trim. I'm going to click mode. I'm going to actually set it to standard down here. What this lets me do is it gives you a little bit more control over what you're trimming. So it says select object to trim or cutting edges. I'm going to click cutting edges, and it's going to say select cutting edges. Let's say I wanted to cut this object at this line. I'm going to select my cutting edge. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to trim that end off. I'm going to right click, start the trim command again. I'm going to select this as my cutting edge. I'm going to right click because I've already selected my cutting edge, and I'm going to trim this end off. Quick trim and quick extend are good when you're trying to move quickly, but they're not as, it doesn't give you as much control as using standard trim and standard extend. Because we changed the mode in the trim command down here, it's now set to standard. I'm going to hit escape a couple times. I'm going to go up to the extend command, and I'm going to hit the mode. You'll notice, even though we didn't change extend to standard, because trim and extend are now combined in a sense, it's going to set both to the same. We changed trim to standard, it changed extend for us. And extend works in the same way. So in quick mode, extend is just going to shoot that line out every time you click it. With it set to standard mode, it's going to ask me to select objects. Let's say I want to select this as my extend line. I'm going to right click, and you'll notice it says path does not intersect with the bounding edge, which means that when this line is extended out, this line isn't going to touch it. So down here in the command line, you're going to notice that you get this edge button. Click the edge button and set it to extend, because it's going to give us an implied edge. So even though these two lines don't intersect and will not intersect when this is extended up to here, the implied edge tells AutoCAD, ghost this line out a little bit further and give this line something to hit. So we're going to set that to extend. And now watch. This is still set to my extension line, and I'm going to extend this line out, and it's going to hit that imaginary intersection, that implied edge of this line. I'm going to right click to end that command. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to extend. Extend is EX on the command line. Let's say I want to extend this endpoint to the implied edge of this line. So I'm going to pick this as my boundary line. I'm going to right click. I'm going to mouse over that, and it shoots it straight out to where that implied edge is. So, like I was saying, quick mode is good, standard mode is better in both trim and extend. The implied edge is incredibly important because you're not ever going to be in a situation where all of the lines are going to be touching when you extend them. You actually want that implied edge so you can shoot lines out to a certain point, intersecting at an imaginary point where two lines hit each other. Okay, the last thing in the modify panel I want to talk about, we've already talked about move, rotate, extend, and trim. We talked about copy. We talked about mirror. We talked about not really using stretch because we have grips, and grips are gold. We talked about scale. we're going to talk about fillet. Now, a lot of people say that this is fillet. It's not a food. It's a fillet. It rounds the edge of two objects. I'm going to click fillet, and it's going to ask me to select the first object or undo polyline, which we have not spoken about, radius. Radius is very important. Let's say I want to take this line here and this line here and create a perfect 1-unit arc between them. Now the fillet command is going to create a perfect tangent. Tangent, radius, tangent between these two lines, and it's going to tie it together. So let's say click radius, specify fillet radius. I'm going to say 1, enter. I'm going to click beyond the midpoint because I want it to fillet from this endpoint to this endpoint. Click this line, and I'm just hovering over the second line, and it's giving me a ghosted image of the result. I clicked that line, I'm going to zoom in. This is a perfectly tangent arc to both of those lines. So fillet, let me undo back, let me show you again. Undo. Let's do fillet again. Fillet is F, enter. You can either click radius down at the bottom or you can do R, enter. Fillet radius, let's do a fillet radius of 2. I'm going to right click as my enter. I'm going to pick this point for this line segment and this line segment. It extends the line out and draws the arc perfectly. So both of these lines were extended. There are cases where the line will trim. Here's another example. Let's run the fillet command again. Let's set our radius to 5. Not 56, 5. And let's fillet this to this at a radius of 5. Now you notice that this line segment is going way past our second fillet line. I'm going to click this one first, and it's going to tell me that the fillet radius is too large. What that means is that it cannot cleanly make a 5-unit radius between these two pieces. So let's do the fillet command again. Let's change our radius to 2. Let's pick this one and pick this one. So it trimmed this object way back, drew a perfect 2-unit arc, and trimmed this object back. We're going to get into all of this more when we actually start drawing something. This is just to cover what the command is and what the command does. In the following episodes, we're probably going to start drawing some more complicated stuff. We can get into text. We can get into layers. We can get into the properties window. But for now, these are just the modifiers. And that's it for this one. Thanks for coming to Weaponized CAD. I'm your host, Danny. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you in the next one.